Hello and welcome back to MMA Crypt Fighting Talk. We had a cracking night of fights at Bamma 14 last night, as only 2 of the 13 scheduled fights went to the judges' scorecards. Most of the finishes were KO/TKO. Sadly, we are only going to cover the 3 main card bouts that aired on Channel 5 Star last night for the UK viewers. Joining me to discuss last night's action is MMA Crypt's Greig Marshall. Greg, are you ready to discuss some knockouts, slams and back and forth action?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's rock and roll. Round 1, Jim Wallhead versus Florent. Better angle. Now this one started off a little slow for my liking, and sadly after round 1, had me thinking if Jim Wallhead still had the passion and desire. Also, if Bamma should even invite him back, to be honest. Things picked up a little bit in round 2, as Wallhead managed to control things a little bit more. Thankfully, round 3 ended in a knockout scoop slam, which certainly made up for the first 2 rounds. Greg, what did you make of the fight last night between Jim Wallhead and Florent Betterangle? Did it start a little slow for your liking too?
Yeah, definitely. I was expecting Wallhead to dominate him, and to start with, it looked like Florent was going to take the win. He came out strong. Obviously, Wallhead's had a couple of losses recently, over in Bellator and his last fight against Eddie Ellis. But I expected him to go through this guy quite easily, and it took him a wee while to get going, which was a surprise. But he did pick it up, and it was a nice KO finish at the end.
As Betterangle was walking out, there was mentioned his record. I think it was something like 14 wins, 8 losses. And I was thinking this is sort of like a gimme fight for Jim Wallhead. Obviously, I believe they expected him to beat Eddie Ellis and take the title, and obviously that didn't happen. And they wanted to build Jim Wallhead back up in this fight. Do you think this was sort of a gimme fight by Bamma, just to build Jim Wallhead back up there, Greg?
Yeah, I think it probably was. There's probably no such thing as a gimme fight, but they've given him a guy that, on paper, looks like he should beat quite easily anyway. It turned out that way in the end, but the first round definitely didn't look as if it was going to be a gimme fight.
To me, he seemed to have a slow start to the fight. It reminded me much of the Eddie Ellis fight. Like, he had Eddie Ellis up, and he sort of let him off the hook, you know. And then for the next 2 rounds, he was sort of like just slow in his pace. It was like he couldn't get out of second gear. And in his post-fight speech, he mentioned this. He said, "I can't put what I do into training into the cage," and he seemed a little frustrated at that. Did you pick that up too, Greg? That he had a really slow start in the Eddie Ellis fight and this fight, and maybe he's putting a little bit too much pressure on himself somehow?
Yeah, he definitely came out slow anyway. Whether he's putting pressure on himself, and as for he can't quite put into practice what he does in training. That's what everybody says when they lose. Everyone says that they're training great, but they just can't convert it into wins.
Well, that's what I don't get. He's fought for Bellator and whatnot. You know, he's been around the block.
Yeah.
You know, he's not like a newcomer. And he said even in his post-fight speech, he went, the Eddie Ellis fight, you know, he couldn't sleep. That's what he said in his post-fight speech. I was like, whoa, you can't sleep. You know, you must be under some stress there. I wonder why he's stressing himself. Do you think it was because it's for a Bamma title? Do you think that's why he had all this pressure on him?
Yeah, possibly. There's always something that can go wrong, but the better guys usually fight through it. Obviously, he didn't manage the last time out, but he's managed to fight through it this time. It'll be interesting to see what they give him next anyway, and see if he comes out firing right for the start next time.
That's what I'm looking forward to. I wonder who they give him. There was obviously, Dee said to Paul Daley in Paul's fight, you know, would you fight Jim Wallhead? I thought that was a bit silly considering, you know, to his friends and train together.
Yeah.
So, why would you ask somebody that? Bamma seemed really good at bringing in the outside talent, but personally, I think they might put Jim Wallhead in against Eddie Ellis for the belt for a second time. Do you think that might happen there, Greg?
I was just going to say the same thing. I wouldn't be surprised if they make the rematch with Eddie Ellis. I don't think they'll be looking to have Ellis as their champion for too long. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing to say, but I don't imagine he's the kind of face they want to be their champion in the UK.
That's what I was going to say next. If you notice, Jason Jones got the belt at Bamma 13, and Eddie Ellis took the belt at Bamma 13, but they didn't feature any of the champions last night. They only featured the guys who got beat by them.
Yeah.
Like Max Poe-Nunes, they featured him.
Although, to be fair, Nunes wasn't meant to be fighting. He came in as a last-minute replacement. But I know what you mean. Like, that does look like they've been kept to the side. They've given other guys fights and probably looking to make the rematch and then get the champions that they actually wanted to have.
It's like hide it at least, you know. Don't make it too obvious. We don't want you as our champion. Just stay off the card for a while. It's alright. Just sit there with a belt. You know, we'll build up these guys and they can kick your ass in like 6 months' time. It's alright. Okay, moving on to round 2. Colin Fletcher versus Mansur Barnawi. Now, this fight really got my juices flowing, Greg. I knew they were going to go after each other early on in this fight, and both fighters didn't disappoint either. If you watch the weigh-ins there, Greg, the smiley Colin Fletcher was replaced with a serious-looking Colin Fletcher, and he was all about the action last night. Give us your thoughts on the rock'em sock'em fight between Colin Fletcher and Mansur Barnawi last night, Greg.
Well, before I get to the fight, the rumour was that Fletcher was going to come out on a horse yesterday.
Yeah.
And health and safety stopped it from happening, and that's why he came out in the wee clown car, which looked a bit pathetic because it took him forever to get to the ring. It would have been alright if he was able to go, but he looked as if he was awkward as anything. And after that, well, the fight, I think, I was a bit disappointed in Fletcher, to be honest. I like him, obviously, but he had a couple of chances to get Barnawi. Like you say, it was a back and forward fight, and he never quite took it. And then as soon as Barnawi managed to grab him, it looked like Fletcher just kind of gave up to me. He allowed him to sink in the choke really easily, as if he maybe thought that he was going to be able to get out of it, or just relax inside the choke. But once the choke was sunk in, he was gone.
You know, to be honest with you, Greg, I actually think he looked a bit tired, obviously, when he got down to the ground. Do you know he was trying to get in the dash choke and he was turning?
Yeah.
If you looked at Colin Fletcher's face, he looked like he was gassing, you know, after the, heavy back and forth. But I really think Mansur Barnawi is a strong little fucker. Because if you watch the Kurt Warburton fight, he grabs hold of Kurt Warburton by one hand from the back of the head, and he just punched fuck out of him. The way he was doing it with Colin Fletcher last night, and then he just looked like he was out muscling Colin Fletcher. And then when he put that choke in, he had one side of his neck free, so he wasn't going to go asleep. It was a pain move. He tapped off a pain move, because I was shocked when he tapped for, that's not in, it's okay. And then he tapped, and it was clear it was pain. Even Colin Fletcher said post-fight, he said, you don't realise how strong it was. He was squeezing on it. So, but it was much along those lines anyway. But do you think Mansur Barnawi is fucking stronger than he looks?
Well, I think you're right about that though, because I thought it looked more like he was just trying to crank him because he couldn't get his arm under his neck. So it's definitely been a power move. Whether he's stronger than he looks, I don't know.
I'll wrestle him, Greg. I'll find out.
Well, to be fair, he's had 2 good wins. Warburton is legit, and Fletcher, obviously, no slouch in the cage either. He's coming on quite late. I noticed down his record, he lost to Kevin Lee. Who's just signed for the UFC recently. So maybe these 2 wins will help him get a move to the UFC.
He's fucking 21. I was shocked when he showed his age last night. He's 21. Regardless if he's lost to Kevin Lee, who's another young up and coming guy, he's got a bright future, Mansur. He's beat Kurt Warburton, now Colin Fletcher, and finished them both. Regardless, wherever he goes, this guy's got a bright future. Hopefully he makes some wise decisions. But one thing's for sure, it comes to fight. The UFC like people who come to fight.
Oh yeah.
And so they should maybe be keeping tabs on Mansur. I would not be surprised. I don't think they're going to pick him up just yet. I think probably one more win. But you never know. They might even pick Mansur up before that. Just with injuries, you never know with injuries. This UFC normally bring in newer fighters. They're scouting out. Sometimes with an injury on a card, they sort of go, time to bring him in, let's give him a go. So hopefully, he might get his chance sooner rather than later.
He's certainly got a chance anyway, because he looks talented. And like you say, at 21, with a couple of wins like Warburton and Fletcher under his belt, he went the full 3 rounds with Kevin Lee as well. I'd like to see him get his chance soon anyway. And now he's obviously retained his belt 2 times now as well.
What does this say about Kevin Lee? Fuck, you know what I mean?
Well, Lee is rated though, isn't he? He is rated really high.
Colin Fletcher, he was knocked down early on, pretty much from the first 10 seconds they went at each other. And did you think he was finished there? Because I was like, oh, looking, is he okay? But he seemed okay. Colin said it was actually more of a slip. Paul said it was more of a slip than knocked down. Do you think he's telling the truth there, Greg?
Well, I actually thought it was a slip because the commentary team said it was a knockdown, but I actually thought, when I'd seen it, thought it was a slip, and I rewound it at that point to have a quick look again, and it did look like a slip to me. So whether it was or not, but it did look more of a slip because he barely caught him.
Okay, moving on to round 3, Paul Daley versus Romero de Silva. Now, I didn't know much about Romero de Silva last night. Did you know much about him?
Aye, loads. I knew that he was fighting Paul Daley.
Well, either way, you know, I knew he was going to give him a serious test because obviously he's very experienced, and you could tell just by looking at him, he's a huge guy, isn't he?
He was massive.
What did you make of de Silva's performance, though, Greg? Did he impress you?
He surprised me because I thought if anything, he was just going to go in there and get caught really early. But he managed to hold his own, and he did catch Daley a couple of times as well. But Daley obviously had the winning of the fight right from the start. He looked comfortable right through the fight, I thought.
Well, he does train with the Black Zillions.
Yeah.
So that was another thing I was looking at. Obviously, you're going to train there. You know, you got solid wrestling and certainly solid striking. And his fucking striking was impressing me last night. What did impress me, though, Paul Daley, did you notice he was more calm and collected? He was picking his shots more wisely, you know. But on the odd time when he did get aggressive, de Silva fucking tagged him hard too, especially in round 2. I was actually getting worried. I thought Paul Daley was going to get knocked out for a second. Did you think he might get knocked out, Greg?
Yeah, well, there was one point where Daley went in and I thought, oh, he's got this one.
Yeah.
This guy's beat. And then the guy swung, I think it was a looping right, and it caught Daley, and I thought, oh, you fucker, this could be good now. But Daley played it well for him there. He stepped back, stayed out of his range for a few punches, and then it was just after that he moved in for the finish. But
he looked so much bigger than Paul Daley. I actually didn't think Paul Daley had the power to knock him out, which is probably pretty stupid of me. You know what I mean? He's knocked out so many people. He's got so much power. But he didn't look as big as he normally does. I just don't know if that was because de Silva was much bigger than him and muscular. So, but that uppercut, fuck, it was so fast. And he just dropped.
It was brutal. There's times when you're watching a fight and you just go, what? You kind of find yourself shouting at the telly.
Yeah.
Because it's so damn good, and that was one of them. That was a brutal uppercut, and the way he did it, he feinted the right, so the guy would move into the uppercut. That's what made it even the better, because the guy kind of ducked into it as well. It was perfect.
Okay, that's about for today's Bamma 14 show. Hope you all enjoyed the show and mainly agreed with what I had to say. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out other episodes of MMA Crypt Fighting Talk.